recording. Okay, so we want to record this session. Okay, before we start, let me just give you a little bit introduction about the Center for Future Studies. The center was recently launched in February 2020, and it is the first of a kind center, not just only in the UAE, honestly, but also in the Middle East that looks into future thinking and future studies and trying to put together educational programs in terms of the courses, in terms of professional degrees and diplomas that we will be teaching at the Center for Future Studies. Hopefully, we're starting in September 2020, and we'll see how this goes. If we go online by then we will start online, and we'll see how the situation goes. Not just only education and providing educational programs, but also we work on other services. We do consulting, we do future studies in different domains. We do scenario planning, trend analysis, weak signal identification and analysis, and of course we use the latest foresight tools and methodologies that were developed by our futurists. The center, we're lucky really, and I'm really very proud to say so, that today we have a network of a very well-known futurists from around the world. Those futurists, you can think of them as the fathers of future foresight, and they are the people who have established this science. So this really gives the Center for Future Studies a niche in what it's trying to accomplish and really serve our clients and stakeholders in creating and shaping a better future through offering world-class programs. So, I'm really very fascinated by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai. And I could not really find a better way to describe the science of future foresight from the words that His Highness has said. He said that the future belongs to those who can imagine it, design it, and execute it. It isn't something you await, but rather create. So he really combined everything from the imagination, from the future thinking. You try to imagine how is the future is going to look like, or you try to explore the future, but at the same time, then you reflect back and you start. Okay, once you identified your desired future, you start designing that future, and of course, most important, not just only the design, but also executing it. So it's really very beautiful word from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid. Another very inspiring personality, not just only for the UAE, but I think for the whole world. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, the Deputy Supreme Commander of the UAE Armed Forces. Just recently, and this was, I think, in February, end of February, beginning of March, was gathered some people in his majlis in the palace, and he gave a very fascinating talk. And he said that we have to be healthy, we have to be strong, and we have to be more developed. We are living to secure a future for our grandchildren. And really, when you think about these words, we are living to secure a future for our grandchildren. It really embodies the concepts of future thinking, the concepts of looking into the future, exploring the future, and start, working towards, your desired and your preferred future that you want, to live, or you want to bring we want to bring to our grandchildren. Okay. Now I'm going to present few slides here. Since I'm the first speaker, I will present few slides about the situation, okay, about post-COVID-19, anticipating and shaping the future. And I would like really to start by asking this question: why we are in this situation today? Yeah, we want to think about it. What happened really that we have this pandemic, and it has impacted the whole world in a way that we never thought of. Haven't we seen, this epidemic and pandemic coming out? Haven't there been studies or at least signs, or trends, for this pandemics and studies that have been done around the world that we got this shock? I think many futurists will agree with me that this is not a black swan event. The COVID-19 or the coronavirus, there were a lot of signs that were there, and this goes back to the 2000 and 2006. Many epidemiologists have warned the world about spread of pandemics, and one of them is Larry Brilliant in his TED Talk in 2006. He really alerted the world that the world is not ready and not prepared for the pandemics. And he mentioned we need rapid detection and rapid response. Rapid detection in a way that we need to quickly, identify spread of disease and pathogens before it exaggerates more into a pandemic. And rapid response, of course, we need to respond quickly so that it does not become a pandemic. So, I really like to call this, maybe this is interesting, we had the vaccine, but we failed to take it. Yes, we had the vaccine, and I don't mean the vaccine, the true vaccine that we have, but at least we had the foresight. Then from 2006 and 2015, Bill Gates came and also talked about pandemics, and he warned the world about it. In 2018, the World Health Organization has alerted the world during the World Government Summit in Dubai. And so there were many signs actually, and many studies, many war game scenarios, scenario planning exercises conducted, one of which is the Event 201, which was conducted just in October 2019 in the US by the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in association with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And of course, they alerted the world. They said that the world is not ready for pandemic and we should do something. There was similar exercises before that by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Again, another study scenario planning exercise was conducted in DC, again, and around also October 2019, and they predicted the same. So we cannot say that we could not see the signs for this pandemic. The signs were there. It was just a question of when this is going to happen. But then why did we fail to react? What happened? I mean, okay, the purpose of foresight is really to get insight, and then you have an action. The world need to take an action to correct, the problem. And I believe, I myself think it was mostly a leadership crisis. And what do I mean by that? The leaders, different leaders from around the world, starting the US, and you name the other countries, they failed to take that insight that those studies have alerted them, and take that insight and act upon it. So it was really a leadership crisis until, of course, we got hit, by this disease, and we see now the impact worldwide. So what we can really do to shape our future and achieve preferred outcomes and avoiding undesirable ones is what future thinking and foresight is all about. And it becomes essential that the 21st century skills we need to cultivate, future thinking and foresight is becoming one of the essential 21st century skills that we need to cultivate widely in everything we do. And also not just only that, but as well, this can help us embrace disruption. I really love this, you see the pictures, at the bottom. saying that uncertainty is the future certainty. And this is true. You know, embracing uncertainty requires you to test your assumptions about the shape of the future that we want, and ask questions and explore possibilities. And recently, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed had tweeted, this was last week, when he said, a new world awaits us, requires different tools and the new priorities, and our country will be the most prepared and the fast rising, God willing. It shows how the UAE is really embracing foresight, and you know, I'm going to talk in a while about our foresight strategy, and to explore the future, to anticipate the future, to anticipate the uncertainties that are, you know, becoming more and more into our future, and trying to, you know, design, you know, our future and then execute it as he mentioned. So the UAE government in 2016 launched a future foresight strategy, and the purpose of this strategy is really to seize opportunity and anticipate the challenges and anticipate the future and anticipate the changes that are, you know, happening in the world. As it says that it's explore, predict, analyze, and address future challenges by proper preemptive planning. And it encompasses many sectors in the government, whether it's a government services, the health sector, which is now highly impacted by this pandemic, the education sector, the economy, the infrastructure, transportation, food and water security, you name it. So this strategy is a very comprehensive, and we've seen a lot of initiatives came out since the strategy was launched. We have a Dubai Future Foundation with Dubai Future Academy is also trying to bring this foresight science and future foresight, educate the people, train the people of the UAE, and build capacity in the country. Is really, I think it becomes important and essential now that leadership and leaders, especially the executives, the directors, also they need to have the foresight skills that will, you know, that they will feel comfortable when they navigate this uncharted world. And of course, we have a very long-term vision, the UAE Centennial Plan, the 2071 Centennial Plan. And with this plan, looking about 50 years from now, the UAE wants to be the best country in the world, not just only in education, wants to be the best, wants to have the best economy in the world, the best healthcare system in the world, the best education system in the world. And in order to achieve that, I think we have a lot of things to do. We are in the right track. And we have, I say to myself that we are lucky, and we thank God that we have a leadership who are visionary and empowering us to really explore the future and embrace the disruption, and looking forward how we can bring this vision into reality 50 years from now. There have been many programs that were conducted by the Prime Minister Office, Future Foresight Training Program with Oxford University, where more than 120 staff from the governments have graduated from that program. There is a series of workshops that are going on regularly called Shaping the Future Workshop at Dubai Future Foundation, and promoting utilization of future trends. Okay, so providing scholarships as well to the locals to pursue future foresight programs, whether in the UAE or abroad, and also partners with international organizations trying to bring future foresight program to the UAE, and think tanks, and also conferences. So there have been many things that are happening. We want really to play a bigger role from the University of Dubai and from the Center of Future Studies in educating our youth, educating our nationals, and be a center of excellence in future foresight, not just only in the UAE, but regionally and globally. And we have a network, alhamdulillah, like I said, with a very good futurists from around the world. This is my last slide, which I would like to quickly speak about. So, and of course, you know, our leadership in the 2020, at the beginning or at the end of the 2019, have declared that the year 2020 is the year towards the next 50 years. We want to put plans, and we want to foresight the future for the next 50 years. So you can imagine how big is this mission, you know, and I believe that we have the capability to do that, but at the same time, we need to build more of this capacity and capability through 5 things. We need to ensure that future readiness, preparing and shaping the Emirates of the future, the UAE of the future. You know, and this part of this is really making giant leaps in the economy, in education, in the health, the society, food security, infrastructure, and media. And our leadership has announced that there is a higher committee led by His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who is going to foresee this program and develop the 50-year development plan. And we would love to be part of this. And I think this is something really very exciting, very interesting to try to explore what the UAE, what the future is the UAE wants to achieve in 2070. Again, in 2071, looking into the broader vision of the Centennial Plan. But not just only that, but what are the plans to take us there? And I think that is most important, plan and actions. So top priorities is now investing in talents and capabilities. And this is what we try to do at the Center of Future Studies. And of course, we look into foresight into 3 things. We want to have the foresight capability and future thinking to get the insight, but also to act on the insight. I think what happened with COVID-19 and coronavirus, the action was not there. The insight, we did the foresight, we had the insight, but where are the people to act on that foresight? And where are the people to act on that insight? And I think that was the problem and of course, until it became a pandemic and it became too late to contain, and then countries started to have, you know, those counter measures of social distancing and so forth. So I think I've taken probably almost 20 minutes. I'm gonna give now the chance to Derek to present his topic. Derek is gonna talk to us about an interesting subject, COVID-19 as a paradigm changer. So it's yours, Derek.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Firstly, it's great to see so many people, and including some people I know very well, which is excellent, both ex-students and colleagues. So I'm going to talk about, well, first of all, I'm very happy to be part of this new Center for Future Studies. Who mentioned my wife Helga is a futurist, but we've both been working now in the UAE for quite a long time with the governments on the foresight. And I have to say, everything that Saeed has just said is very much true. There's a real deep interest in both developing people, talents, right, in foresight, but also as organizations, as government organizations and companies, to really to understand and to think about where all this should go so we can take action well in advance. So I'm very, very pleased about that. I'm going to talk about this whole idea of COVID-19 as a paradigm changer, but really about how I think this new situation will potentially accelerate the critical aspects of our lives and really create perhaps some new paradigms, but also this requirement for some new policy and government that really takes on more of a global perspective and really does force us to think about our lives in a very, very different way. I'm governed, generally, my thinking's governed by this quote that you're going to see now from Nietzsche, which is about the whole aspect of you've got to have chaos within you to create a dancing star. And I just have to tell you, I think there's, in this chaos that we've just been facing, and hopefully for most of you it's not been total chaos, but more a complex situation, that we really need to create new opportunities from this. And it's a fantastic opportunity really to think about ourselves, think about our societies and how we move forward. Helga and I, in the meantime, have developed things like this opportunity map that you see here to really look at where we can take this. And those of you that are sort of already knowledgeable about foresight will clearly understand that what the essence of what we do, right, basically is to work with unstructured knowledge in unknown worlds. So no one knows the future. We don't, if as futurists particularly, or I like to call myself now more of a foresight scientist, you know, we're working with things like weak signals. We're working with sort of things that don't actually really exist. And our job's to put it all together, right? To structure it and understand what it means. We're always working with discontinuity. Foresight really isn't about an evolution of today. It's about having to think in the future and place yourself in the future and think about what that can be. The other thing is that really it is about the reconceptualization and recontextualization of what we know, of what we really think we know at least. And, you know, much of, yes, we can project things and we can have this wisdom and vision, but at the end of the day, if you really think about where we're at this moment in time, and you think about the concept of society, or the concept of friendship, or the concept of social, they've been recontextualized so much by this situation that we're really in a very, very new place. Now, this particular piece of work we did really threw out some sort of ideas. First of all, I think the way I approach this is, you know, what type of society do we want, right? I mean, this is a moment where we need to sort of go back and reflect and say, well, and many of people have said, do we fear what we've become, right? And that's a big question, not paying attention. You know, this issue of, comes up every day now, what's the price of life, right? You know, and these types of conversations are really critical to this. And what I found in looking at these opportunities were 5 very specific areas. The potential for the rebirth of society, the potential for more humanized economics, a whole issue around knowledge and how knowledge is shifting, technologization. Obviously, we all know we're moving with these new technologies and things are moving fast very quickly, but how do we do it ethically? How do we make these changes so that they're not totally and fully disruptive to every aspect of our life, right? And then this issue at the end that I want to talk about, which is, you know, moving into the realms of going beyond only human-centric society. So moving on, let's talk about the first one of these, the rebirth of society, very quickly. First of all, and I mentioned this issue of revalorizing life, you know, what do we want to be in the future? Where do we want to go? And this, I'm not specifically looking here at UAE. UAE has the 2071 plan. There are quite a lot of good work going on to understand that. But equally, I think this has opened up our opportunities to think about, well, what do we really want to do? What's the balance? What are those elements that are critical to us as we move forward? Things like, for example, I mentioned before, you know, what's the life worth, but what's about our individual identity, about the community identity? It was very interesting during this whole sort of time, and particularly Johnson before he actually got ill, when he said, there is a society. Yes, Mrs. Thatcher, there actually is a society. And no more positive has been that sort of comment than now when we as a society have had to literally function in a way without the tools and the normal sort of communication potential and all the other aspects that we need. And we've had to be very, very disciplined, right? And that's sort of been a difficulty for a lot of countries that traditionally don't show a lot of discipline. There are some that show more and some show less. And I think that's reflected very much in the number of cases and deaths and so on. And I want to go deeply into that. But this idea of, you know, what are our anchors? The whole thing around family, right? The reintegration of families. The fact that, you know, we've all had to work at home and be amongst our families and the fears and worries we've had when our families are not with us. So these types of effort, these areas have been very, very critical about this. So another aspect I think around this has been the issue of resourcefulness, right? The fact how resourceful we've all had to be, how we've all had to find new ways and look at new values to social action and those types of areas. So a lot of things around that. I mean, the home becoming a full life hub, right? I mean, that's crazy. We learn at home, we work at home, we do far more. We have to socialize from home. It's a very different world. So going on from that, let's talk about this issue of, if we can move on, to humanized economics. I'm, for one, really hopeful that we are going to see the end of neoliberalism, the end of extreme neoliberalism at least, and we're having a shift towards meta-economics, where we can look at the overall, the holistic aspect of economics, right, including all the sustainability issues, looking at you know, building a community of resilience. Dr. Saeed just mentioned this issue about resilience. Resilience is really critical in all this. Part of what he was talking about, which was a failure of governments to react, is born out of this issue of the balance, right? Finding a balance and between economic growth and economic development, and where that the funding, or where the funds, where the wins and the gains from that economic balance go to, and us, the society, right? The rest of us all, which is what we're made up of. And getting that balance right about where we should be literally creating this resilience, which means that we are always prepared as best we can be. Of course, things happen. It's the life of the futurist, knowing where the disruptors and the, but this wasn't a black swan. You're absolutely right. The thing around this, I would say, is that, yes, we're going to see different types of markets going forward, and we've already been seeing that for quite a while, new distribution systems, smart distribution systems, payments, a lot of issues. But one of the other things I'm particularly interested, particularly because I work within education, is this issue about what I call the knowledge reboot, right? New currencies of knowledge. And we're already seeing, first of all, the factor that, you know, not everybody's following the same more traditional types of education, which I think is a good thing, given that we do know that traditional education, certainly at the moment, is not actually doing its job of creating what we need for the marketplace. There will be a very big shift, without any question, towards more remote learning. There will be a big shift also to employability, right? The whole idea that education should be more about employability. That means that it's going to be much more creative focused. Our shortage in the future is going to be around creatives, around the need for creatives. But when I talk about this knowledge reboot, I'm also talking about new modalities of learning, new modalities of knowledge, right? That knowledge that's created between human and machines. We will not be living in an environment where it's only about us. We're not now. The amount of knowledge that AI is already creating, and how we integrate all that knowledge into our own knowledge and augment what we are, you know, as humans. And I'll talk a little more about that in a moment, but particularly in the knowledge aspect, I think it's going to be very, very critical. Another aspect, I talked about technologization. Well, we're in a world that we've never literally probably ever been in before. We always talk about, you know, oh, well, every decade, every era sees major changes, and it does. But we're currently in what we call the transdisciplinary age, where these elements are bringing together bio, neuro, quanto, nano, and robo. And what that means, right? What that means literally in terms of what it can do, and what the fears, it can do some amazing things, particularly when we look at bringing together nano and genetics and AI, wonderful things in terms of how we protect our health, how we cure various diseases, et cetera, but it also begs the question of what other things can it create, right? And what are the ethical discussions around that? And one of the big aspects for governance and everyone else is going to be, what are we going to do from the policy point of view on the ethics of all this? And it's a very big question, and to my mind, one of the greater questions. There's no doubt that we're going to have massive technologization. We already have it. We've seen it for the last decade, rapidly moving to every aspect of our life, right? We don't talk about AI as something new anymore. And so clearly those things are changing. And going on from that, and I'd like to make a point here, is that one of the first places we're going to see this is in what we call HMR, which is shifting from human resources to human machine resources, right? Beginning to sort of build a collaborative ecosystem of kinetic workplaces where augmented humans, that's humans that are augmented either by implants at some point, but certainly with all the tools around them. And as you'll probably be noticing, there's a massive shift in growth in the transhuman movement at the moment, which is something one needs to watch, because that's and certainly about life extension and all the areas around learning, like you know, lifelong learning and everything else. These are all built into these areas. But more importantly here, the ability to understand our role, but together with intelligent machines, and particularly as they become more and more intelligent, is going to be absolutely critical, because together we need to look at them as intelligent assets. We need to ensure that each of these, and there are multiple elements playing a game here, all have their roles, optimize their roles, play the biggest part possible in generating our society and improving it going forward, without creating incredible disruption in terms of jobs and so on and so forth, right? But one of the aspects around this I want to sort of just say is that, remember, and if you look back on this, all of the new jobs we've had in the last decade, right? I don't want to go through them all now because we don't have time, but I can list for you about 30 off the top of my head. Jobs that did not exist in 2010 that exist today. And if you think back about that, you'll also understand that there are going to be an incredible number of new jobs between now and 2030, 2035. We've done a lot of work on this, including super jobs, which, by the way, are jobs that involve both humans and machines together. And I'd like to say, pay attention to this. It's going to be a really big shift. And this working from home has certainly been one of the elements that's going to really shift this paradigm and accelerate this paradigm. So I'm ending with that. I'd like to say thank you very much indeed. I'm looking very much forward to September when the courses begin at the center. Very happy that I'm part of that. And thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Derek. It was really very illuminating, thought-provoking presentation. You know, that really took us to the far future with the very conflicting issues and very serious issues that I think the world is going to face and needs to really think about it, you know, from the ethics, from the integration of man and machine together. We really jumped into the presentation before, you know, I get a chance to ask you, Derek, since you are in Croatia right now, can you tell us briefly, how is the situation there in Croatia? And in Europe, probably you can get.
Yeah, I mean, it's Croatia, I think, well, Croatia, we've been exceptionally disciplined. To be fair, I'm partly shocked of how disciplined we've been, but people have been really disciplined. And I think part of the reason for that is, and particularly in our area, I live an hour from Italy, right? And we saw what happened in Italy. And so people straight away, they closed the borders very, very quickly. I would say that the Italians and the Spanish, I'd hate for me to say this, I have lots of friends in both, and probably the French to a certain degree, were less disciplined at the beginning. I think part of the problem about all this is, and I don't want to go into a whole spiel on it, is you mentioned that people weren't prepared and governments weren't prepared and countries weren't prepared, but at the same time, there was so much misinformation from our leaders at the beginning. Right? I mean, really, And some of the main countries that have the most problems at the moment, and you know, the United States, UK are amongst those, and Russia at the moment, are because the leaders really said, oh, we have control of all this. Right? And they didn't react quick enough. And I think those countries that did react, and UAE was one of those, I actually came back to Croatia on the last flight out of UAE. I went straight into self-isolation for 2 weeks. And I would say we've been very disciplined. So we've only had 83 deaths at the moment in Croatia. Which I know it's a small country, but it's been very, very controlled, and they are predominantly.
What is the number of population roughly?
About 4.something million, 4.4 million, something. So it's a small country. But that said, most of those have been in old people's homes, which is terrible. But you know, we're beginning to open up, but very, very, very slowly, and I'm very pleased about that. That it's not this sudden rush into everything; it's a very slow rollout.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Derek, for sharing your experience tonight with us. I think we need to move, you know, to the last presentation. We kept you waiting for Fawaz, you know, to start your presentation. But Dr. Fawaz Abu Sitta is going to talk to us tonight about the plausible future scenarios. So let's see what the future look like, Fawaz.
Hi, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be with you, Dr. Saeed and Derek, and to present to our audience this presentation. I will start with a quote from the French writer Voltaire. He said, and I quote here, "Doubt is an unpleasant state, but certainty is a ridiculous one." And your question at the beginning, why we didn't react, because most of organizations consider the future with high certainty. We live with a VUCA world. We live with we live in a world that is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's why we tend to treat the future with, and actually futures, not as a single, not in a certain manner. Not only that, it's also absurd to look at the impossibility with zero. If I were to take the organization 4 months ago, and I would tell them that half of the population will stay at home, they wouldn't accept that. So today, Derek and Dr. Saeed, actually their core job is to help organizations to look at the impossibility and to bring this and to look at the weak signals. Again, people tend to look at data and facts. We have seen and we look at data and we believe data and facts is good an input for the future. Data interpretation can be different from one to another. For example, the example I'm showing here shows data for a business school. As you see here, there are two different lines, two different trends. It depends how you look at the data and how you interpret the data. What I want to say here, the past, the performance of our past not necessarily can help us in predicting the future. We have to look deeper to that. So I'll give you another example here. This is a multi-billion chart. This has been presented in the board of directors for IBM in 1981. And IBM at that time was dominating the mainframes industry, the technology industry. And they saw Apple penetrating that market. So they've done a forecast. They thought PC will go up and then will go down because of the price of the chip, because of the price of the memory. The board of directors at that time dealt with the future with high certainty. They built the assumption over here. So if someone in that room would say the if statement, can we think differently? Can we look at different scenarios? Things will be different. At that time, they say, okay, we are a big company at the end of the day. We can have our logo. We'll give, there's a kid over a young kid in Seattle. We give him the dose and he will develop that for us. And that was a big mistake because they have been influenced by their bias and by their background. What took them there didn't necessarily have been handled the future. That's why sometimes we have to free ourselves. And here there's another chart that I would like to go with Lloyd Walker. And this is what most people are presenting really in their strategies. They are looking at the most likely. They are looking at, as you look at this chart, that it is darker in the middle, and there each pixel, it's a possibility. Each pixel is the future that we are going to encounter. The darker is the most likely scenarios. Again, with the future studies, with the center over here, we're going to drive your thinking to move towards the impossible and the possible. Derek will take you that. He's an expert in that field. He will drive your thinking, and instead of that dark light, he will take you to the left or the right and create those few alternative futures. So in the next slide, this is how we will see. We have our baseline, which is most of us sees. It's not a big thing. We look at our previous forecast, previous performance, add fluctuation, and that will take us. This is in a stable environment. We can do that, but we are living in a VUCA world. We cannot anticipate this. So we have to look left and right. We have to increase our lenses in order to see. We have to increase the horizons in order to see what is there. For example, hydrogen economy in 2010 was an impossible. 2030, it will be possible. In 2060, it will be even more towards the most likely. The job of us is to help our clients to see those angles, to take you away from the impartiality of thinking. And again, the question will go back again to you, Dr. Saeed, why we haven't been ready? Because we have one strategy. We had one plan. We see the horizon as one thing. We deal with the future with high certainty. We haven't anticipated the scenarios. We haven't considered what will happen. And that's the thing. Future study is dealing with discontinuity and disruption. Forecasting is very good in the era of stability. Future study is an excellent tool for discontinuity and disruption and scanning the future and backcasting, as Derek was keep saying. He will take you to the future. He will make you live the future and then will bring you back. And that's what we do in the future studies. So here, a work done by Ken Wilper and actually applied in the future study by Richard Strotter, a prominent futurist. And actually the world, they developed a 2x2 matrix. And this works a lot with us actually as a futurist in the field of scenario planning. But here they have a measurable perspective, a perspective that all can see. But there is an interpretation perspective that not all of us sees. And we have to trigger the thinking, the creativity, the imagination. Imagination is a very powerful. So we are in the prison of our background to think about the future. And this is really summarize the chart. I'm moving fast because the time is running. So here again, in the center, we are not biased to one framework. In the center, we are open to multiple frameworks. I have this framework from Houston Foresight, where it helps us to create the scenario. We also have Derek, which has the Future Frequency book. It's an interesting book where he draw the framework for future studies. We at the center are providing our clients with those tools and empower them in order to use them. to help them to create and the narrative of the future, the story of the future. And finally here, that's what we are waiting for. These are the scenarios that we have created. Now, at the end of this session, before actually we finish, we're gonna do a vote. Dr. Saeed prepare a vote, and we're gonna see where are we heading. So let's talk about scenario one. Scenario one is the baseline. Here, we think the virus will be under control. Businesses, and we have seen this, businesses are opening. However, there is zoning for travel. And even though the economy is really impacted heavily, but still we're gonna see a moderate recession. We're gonna have, as Derek has mentioned, new form of businesses, new form of educations. And we're gonna have a health passport for us to travel. It will not be an easy one. Then we move to the equilibrium, the scenario two, where we say, okay, we'll relax. Things will be relaxing, economy will open, then we'll be hit hard again with second wave. This time government will not be easy. This time government will have restriction more because the consequences will be harder. However, this will be good for the green environment and the initiative, and for self to stay at home and be attached to family and think and take an opportunity to pause, to speed up. And scenario three is the most optimistic scenario, the transformation scenario. We would see the whole global gonna unify and cooperate with each other. We're gonna see innovation leads immediate detection, new vaccine that comes up, quick market recovery, and the lead in science and innovation. Even though there is a crisis for some industry, there is really innovation coming in the road. Vaccine is really accelerating in the process. There is a possibility of transformation. Finally, the scenario that we don't wish that will happen, that the virus becomes more deadly. Nations and government, instead of fixing this problem, they will be blaming each other. States are fighting for their existence. European Union, there is a question under this scenario if it's still union into this. Nations will break, we'll see nationalism, populism rise, that would happen in the collapse scenario, and capitalism will crash eventually. Thank you.
Great, Fawaz. Very interesting from both of you. This is excellent. Well, I think we are almost maybe 5-10 minutes. I think we can take some questions, but before taking question, I think, like you said, we have a survey or a poll that we want to ask our audience tonight to vote which scenario you think it's going to happen. So let me relaunch the polling. Okay, great. So we have, let's say, 1 minute. I'll give you all to vote, please. Think which scenario that is going to happen, and then we'll show the results. Okay, great. So you can see the polls are running. Okay. Oh, many is going for transformation. That's really the optimistic, and we are optimists, so we happen to be very
optimists.
That's great.
Actually, here, Dr. Saeed warned me not to be biased with any scenario. So I have to present the scenario without putting my feeling into it.
Great. So we have almost 54% going for transformation, and this is really good. We have about 30% equilibrium, while 5% and maybe 5% for the baseline and 9% for the collapse.
But Derek, what Derek would vote for?
Let me end the polling.
I voted, but for privacy reasons.
Let me share the result with you guys. I'm going to share the result. You can see the results here. Everybody can see the results, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
this is what you voted for, 54% for transformation, and we hope that we're going into that transformation phase, but it will require I think a lot of work from governments, and challenging issues to be sorted out. So it's good that we get you guys your feedback. I'm going to look into questions. I will look into the chat, and maybe we have a chance for maybe five minutes to answer your questions. Okay, let's see here. Okay, right. Do you have any ecologists, psychologists, or sociologists on staff at the Future Center? Archaeologists? Fawaz, you want to answer this?
I'll go for that. Yes, we apply some psychology part in the future study because it's important to trigger. Integral theory that you've seen in the slide is actually a prominent Ken Wilber, and we use his references to trigger the thinking. And we don't have psychologists per se part of this exercise, but we are intending to look at different perspectives in triggering the thinking and trying to help people to be impartial in their thinking and unbiased in their thinking.
Great, great. We have another question. Maybe Derek, you want to answer. What do you think about the basic education? What do you think about basic education? Do you project it will remain in the hands of government or state, or will go liberal to allow homeschooling with all the affordance in innovation, technology, and education?
So I think that was my opinion, of course, and I'm working on this. I developed 2 years ago, it was published 2 years ago at least, a new learning system. It's called the Living Learning System, and it's quite complex and involves a combination of eight pillars actually, and it's a very open system. And I think that for college, so I think we have to differentiate here between students in the primary school and students in middle school and beyond. Primary school, for lots of reasons, I believe will continue to have, and hopefully will have, a fairly high degree of in-class education. And when I say that, I think it's important because from a psychology point of view, the general thought is that socialization of kids is incredibly critical and happens predominantly in that period, right up to the age of 10 or whatever we're usually talking about. That's one part of it. And the second part of it is what do we mean by socialization, right? Because once we get into the middle school arena, socialization is very different. Gamers, for argument's sake, are closer in terms of socializing with their guild members than they are with their next door neighbors. So that relationship, that sort of personal one-to-one relationship becomes, I wouldn't say less important, but is less important to the individual at that age than in most cases. And we're seeing that with all the research that's being done on alpha generation, right? The generation that will really be in school, predominantly in school, later in the 20s and early 30s. And I think that when we look though to schooling, particularly in college and university, I think we're going to move. When I did a whole project last year on the future of universities, and one of the key things that came out of that is what is the role of a university in the future, right? I mean, things like we talked about it earlier, transdisciplinary labs, for example, is not something you can actually do very easily at home, and universities have a massive role to play in invention, right? In research, in developing things, and we don't want to lose that. But for courses, I think, everyday courses, we're going to have completely new pathways to learning. We're going to have edu enterprises, you can sort of think of Google and Amazon and everyone else having their own schooling, and there's going to be far more upskilling at colleges for education. And as education becomes more and more about employability and the need for creatives within society, yeah, I think we're going to see big shifts away from traditional learning.
Right. Yes.
Albeit, you know, how do you integrate philosophy into, you know, technology? There's some of the discussions we're having, right?
Great, great. So we have another question from Dr. Dua Al-Ghalban. I think she's asking, you need to give more focus to society impact for all these changes. Do you consider this factor in your program? Because people will take us to the future. We cannot left them behind. Well, if I understand your question correctly, Dr. Dua, you're talking about the society impact, and definitely I think Derek here has mentioned this. You know, when in his slide, what society do we really envision and do we really see for us coming in the future? I think that discussion has to take, you know, place, and not just only that, but the discussion has to take place with the ethical principles and all that consequences, you know, going to the future. What we believe, and I'm really strongly believe in this, we design the future that we really want, you know, for our children, like His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed has said, and Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid has said. And we need to look at all the perspectives, all different kinds of possibilities and the futures, the alternatives. And then we need to reflect back, taking into consideration our human values, our societal values and culture norms. And then see, you know, is that something that we really want to end up, or maybe we want to shift it and adjust the future according to our own needs. You know, I hope that I answered your questions, but definitely society impact is one thing that needs to be considered when you look into the future, not just only the society impact, but all of the other ethical considerations as well. There are many questions actually. I can see this. How can we
Can I suggest something, Doctor? Now we are running the webinar, the course on June,
right.
And I think we'll have the more opportunity to. Derek will be there, Dr. Saeed will be there, myself, and within this workshop, we'll be able to answer most of those questions. And I think also if you send us the questions on the center, we will make sure that we'll answer all of them.
I think what you said, yeah, we want to refer here that, you know, the reason we did this webinar is really also another thing is that we're going to run a workshop by June, either maybe 1st or 2nd week of June. We will let you know. We will post it on social media and also on the university website. And this will be like a 2 days workshop, very detailed. Many of the things that we spoke tonight in this 1 hour webinar will be covered in details in terms of the future foresight, process and methodology, in terms of other things that Derek has mentioned into taking you know, freeing and taking your thinking into the future and then backcasting and going back and then do this scenario planning. So you guys will have probably you know, a much more time to really do this over a 2 days period, about 6 to maybe 8 hours time for the 2 days. So if you want to register, you can always email the Center for Future Study, CFS, at University of Dubai, ud.ac.ae. Again, this is CFS, Center for Future Studies, at UD, University of Dubai, ud.ac.ae. Email us, please, talk to us, and we'll let you know, inshallah, about the details. I can see many questions, but unfortunately we ran out of time, almost 5 minutes late beyond our initial time frame. I want to thank our speakers tonight, Derek from Croatia, Fawaz from Abu Dhabi, myself again from Abu Dhabi as well. And we thank you the participants who came to this webinar. We really had around 75, 78 at most. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you again for voting. And we look probably to interact with you, inshallah, you know, in our program at the Center for Future Studies. Thank you all, and wish you a happy and blissful the rest of the month of Ramadan before Eid, and we hope to meet you again on other occasions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you.
Okay, so I think I'm going to end the meeting here, and before ending the meeting, let me stop the recording.